I want to discuss sketching concepts for our box board structures. This can go with lots of the different structures that we're doing in the structural packaging class. So folding cartons, whether it's corrugated, SBS, or rigid box structures. So we can sketch our ideas, what they look like in perspective, and get a feeling for what we're trying to do and what it's going to look like. But it's very important when we're doing folding cartons that we need to understand how to make these designs as a die line. So this relationship between our shapes that we're drawing in perspective and our die line is very important to keep track of that. I don't want this to hinder us initially, so we can draw our ideas, be very free thinking, and come up with shapes and interesting geometries. But once we start to get to things that we sort of like, it's very important to understand how the die line, so we can make this. Otherwise, we're just sort of dreaming, and there's no executionable point of view. So it's very important to do that. And in these kinds of structures, we do have a lot of dynamics going on. Obviously, the shape, how the die line works, but then there's opening and closing, dispensing perhaps. With these geometries, there might be some dynamics with this particular one. It kind of opens up and then expands and it closes. So there's lots of things to think about. We think about a cardboard box as being relatively simple, but there are many attributes that we have to understand as we're designing that. So I'm just going to go through a couple of little sketch die lines here. I'm not necessarily measuring at this point. I'm estimating proportions and getting a feeling for how it's going to work. The measuring and the specifics that we're going to do when we generate our die lines and make our mock-ups, we'll do that in the 3D program. So I'm going to get back to this design later, but let me start off with some simple designs to start with, just so we can understand how all this is going to work. So I'm going to start off talking about a basic tuck flap structure, a simple box and how to proportion that. So I'm left-handed, so I'm going to do my PDP looking at this direction. PDP is your major primary display panel that you have for graphics. So when I'm sketching, and I have other tutorials on sketching, I'm incorporating perspective and point of view all at the same time. So these dynamics are interesting, and we can use that to communicate with other designers. So in just doing a basic box, I'm going to sketch over here, and I'm just going to draw my PDP, my primary display panel. I'm just going to lean this up a little bit. So here I am incorporating a little bit of perspective, but I'm keeping this quite subtle here in the beginning, in the front. And then I'm going to sort of draw these side panels in a different kind of perspective off to the side. So this point of view gives us a little dynamics. It kind of looks interesting. It's not just straight up. It's sort of leaning. So here's my PDP. That's my primary display panel. It's quite often in drawing these, to help understand what we're doing, is you draw your hidden lines. So I'm going to draw these lines in the back here that help me start to see the shape and how this is going to work. So let's say that's my box. I'm proportioning it. It's going to fit certain items that I like. So now I'm going to try to draw another point of view. I just want to talk about how this one might open. So let's just draw. I'm going to lean this down, change this perspective a little bit, and the point of view. So let's say there's my PDP. That's about right. Now I have this kind of dramatic perspective in this direction, because what I'm trying to do here is emphasize the top and how this is going to open. So here's going to be my tuck. I'm going to have my dust flaps. These little side flaps are called dust flaps. And there's my internal edge. So there is my box. I know this is very straightforward. We're all very familiar with this, but for this exercise, it'll help us explain how these relationships work between these shapes. And then, of course, I can do my hidden lines in here, so I have a feeling what's going on. So that's it. So once I get that, I might want to kind of just darken this in a little bit. And I say to myself, okay, that's good. I like that. So how am I going to build that? So let's start to talk about that. I'm going to draw the PDP first. So I have this rectangular shape right here. And it's about that big. And I have my two side panels. So I'm going to draw the two side panels. And let's say they're about that big. So that's those three. So now I need a back. This design is pretty straightforward. So the back is exactly the same as the PDP. So there are my four panels. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around. So now we have to contain them and hold them together. So I'm just going to put a glue flap here. This glue flap is not really part of my design. It's more of a functional component right now, and it allows me to take all this and glue this together to create the structure. So the way I've designed this, I have my PDP here. This is the front. This is where I'm going to have my graphics, and I'm going to talk about it. I have this flap on top hinging from the back. Normally they hinge it from the front because we've got a nice rolled edge for graphics, but I'm just changing that dynamic a little bit, and I'm going to put it towards the back. So this is understanding the relationship of all these panels and how the die line is going to work. So this is my back. That's my PDP. So I'm going to put this top flap here, which is going to fold around, and I'm going to show that flap there. I'm going to do what's called a reverse tuck. That's a tuck flap. I'm going to put the other flap down here on the other side, and that's going to come and fold to the back. So what we need to do is do our dust flaps. These are the little flaps that help lock this together. Again, these aren't really part of my aesthetic. These are functional flaps. Usually they have like a little detail here to tuck it in, and this tuck will be on this side and this side. And then there's a little detail here that locks that in. So that's just executional part. This is now the die line to make that with this kind of opening characteristic. So that is basically what I want to talk about here, is the relationship between all of these things and how it works. So that's a basic structure. So some of the opportunities that we can create with these, I'm going to go on to another one here. So this will be a little bit more interesting, and we'll talk about how this is going to work. I'm going to start off with again, a pretty basic box. So let's say this is my PDP. I'm going to make that roughly a square. I'm going to come back and I'm going to make the side of my box approximately here. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to angle the top. I'm going to angle that back a little. So for this design, I'm going to show the open view first. Let's draw some hidden lines. I have my flap on the top. I'm going to bring that up this way. Now, this proportion here is roughly a square. These are all kind of squares. So I'm going to come up here with another square about here. This is the flap that's going to close. So I'm going to put my tuck here. And then my little detail to lock that in will go there. So that's it in the open position. I'm also going to talk about adding a divider. So let's say I want a divider right here in the middle. And I'm going to put some components in here, some parts, whatever that might be. So this is my design. So now I need the tuck flaps that are going to lock that in there. So let's say I want to add a little bit more design. Instead of making this so functional like this, what if I added some curves? Because I can, because I have material here. So let's say I make that like a nice beautiful round at the top. And what if I make my tuck flaps nice round shapes also? So what if round is part of our graphic theme or our geometry, or it ties in? So now I have these two nice round flaps, and I have this at the top. And maybe I'm doing it in such a way that I have some graphics in here. So maybe there's some communication, maybe some directions on how to use something, a little sign off, logo, and then maybe there's some beautiful icon materials, and then whatever I'm doing in here. So now I open this up. I have these nice curved flaps. I have printing on the inside, and maybe there's some color or patterns going on in here. And then there might be some components in here, sitting here. There might be like some pads or something in here, and it's a nice presentation. So all of a sudden I have a cardboard box that's doing something more than just opening and closing. So let's see here. I need to figure out the die line on this. So I'm going to start with the PDP. Let's put that about here. Make sure I have enough room. So that's the front. My side panels might be here, and I have this angle going on. So all I'm doing is looking at what I have here and flattening it out. So this side panel is now over here, and then I have the other one on the other side, and those two are exactly the same, and I have these angles. It's like, okay, got it. Now I need the back. The back I'm going to hinge off of here. That back is going to be exactly the same width as this. I'm going to put that here. So there are my 4 panels. Now I need to glue them together, and I'm going to try to incorporate this divider all in the same part. So that corner is folding back to this corner over here. So I need to glue that to that and end up in the middle here. And this is a little confusing, but bear with me. This is where the divider is coming off in the center. So if I take a panel this shape right here, and then I add a panel that's going to go through the middle, that will be that divider, which is taller than the front. That's why it's over here. And then I need to take that and glue that back to the other side. A couple ways to do that. So I think what I'll do is I'll glue it in here. So I'm going to make a glue flap right there. So that's going to look like this. I'm not going to do anything too interesting with the bottom. I am just going to do slit fold. Oops, I don't need that. No, I do. Hold on, like this. I'm just going to make these panels that are going to fold and glue together to create the bottom. So I'm not doing anything too interesting there. I'm going to keep that pretty straightforward. The part I do need is this flap, which is coming off the back. So I have this, and it's approximately another square like this. And here's my center, and I'm putting this curve up here, which I think is kind of interesting. So now I have these other dust flaps. These are also going to be these half curves. So they go here, and they're on center. That's the die line that will make that and function correctly. It'll close. So let's say I want to do a little detail in here when it's closed. I'm going to put a little, actually could be like a little curve thing so I could stay with my curve theme. So in this situation, I'm going to draw the closed version right here so I can keep track of what I'm doing. So I have my side panel, I have my angle on the top, and I have this. So closed, this box is pretty straightforward, but I do have this nice little thing here that's coming out. And that's a nice little message that that's where you open it. So this might be my PVP, I might have my graphics, my descriptors, and maybe a little illustration, and maybe my beautiful little icon that's going on the top. So now I have this nice presentation in a pretty straightforward box. That's the side. And here we have that. So here's this relationship, closed, open. Let's just darken some of this in. Got that going in perspective that way. And then this graphic here. So now I really can start to see what I'm doing and how this is going to work. So nice presentation. So that's this relationship, and this is how I'm going to make it. So obviously I'm guessing. So this is great to come up with as a plan. So when we go into the 3D program, we can start to think about how this is going to work, because we're saying to ourselves, well, we kind of like this. If we could execute that, that would be great. You know, that's if. So that's why we work on these relationships, and we can share this with other designers before we get involved with the 3D and get consensus and say, yeah, we do like this. This is great. We might be talking with the brand people, and they might say we could have certain pieces of information in here. We can talk about certain things. So this is a great way to develop our ideas for folding cartons. So those are pretty straightforward boxes. So I'm going to show a couple of other designs that are a little bit more challenging. So a lot of students ask me about curving boxes. Curving cardboard is unique. It's interesting, but there are certain rules that we have to follow when we're curving a piece of cardboard. So here's a this whole category they refer to as pillow packs, where we're creating these curves on both directions. So let's talk about how this might be developed as a sketch and a die line. So quite often when we're doing this, I have this sample in front of me so I can show you. But quite often we're going to do these designs and we don't have the sample yet. So keep that in mind. I'm going to use this to help guide us through this tutorial. But imagine if we don't have that and we're just thinking in our minds about what we're trying to do. So I'm going to take that design and put that over here. And I'm just going to start to design this. So we have this curved shape in the front. Now this is hard to draw a curve in perspective that's going in two different axes. It's a little challenging, so it's a good idea to hang on to center lines. So here's the bottom, here's my center line, and then here's my top. Now I'm going to have a perspective going in this direction. So let's just start to fix that. And I'm going to do a center line in that perspective also, which will help guide me. So I have a bottom panel here, it's about that big. I have a top panel, which is going to be about that same size. So I'm just going to draw an imaginary straight line down like this, so I can see where that is. If I take that center line and go back to here, it's going to go deeper. This is curving in perspective. So now I have this panel in the middle that's bigger. And if you basically connect the dots, this is curving more than that because it's a curve in perspective. It's a little hard to do this. I'm going to bring this one around to the front here a little bit more. That's essentially how this geometry works. And then this design, I incorporated a fifth panel. Fifth panels are usually these extensions that come up. This fifth panel is essentially, I'm drawing a center line here through the middle. This is my curve. That is my PDP right across the front. So I have all my imaginary lines, my hidden lines in there. So it's essentially what I am drawing here. So to help punch that out a little bit, we can start to darken our edges. This is a cutting edge. And then we come back and then we have that little panel in the back. So this, if I were to shade this, this would all kind of be a shaded thing here. And then if I were to shade this side, this kind of gets dark under here and then comes down to the front. So that's curving this way and this is curving that way. That is imperative when we're doing pillow packs. If you curve in one axis, the adjacent panel has to curve in the opposite direction. So this is a positive curve. I'm folding. I need a negative curve on this side to get that to work. That is a rule with folding cardboard because I'm not sculpting foam or plastic, which we can do lots of sculpting and curves in any direction we want. Here we have to follow these rules. So what does the die line look for? I was going to draw a center line. I'm going to start with this PDP at the top. So I have this nice curved shape like this. And it's coming to here. And then I'm going to draw the rest of this whole front panel. So there's a negative curve here, negative curve here, and let's say it's about that big. And this is coming around like this. That's the front. And then we have a bottom. This curve is going to curve symmetrically to the back on both sides. And then we have the exact same thing on this side. So I'm going to curve this way, this way. This panel will end right along that line. And then we're going to have a top. Yes. So I'm going to put a little dust flap in here. And I'm going to draw this panel here. So this all four of these panels are exactly the same because they're going to glue together on the sides. So what I did here is a couple ways to do this. I have this as my top. This little top right here is coming across up to the back of that fifth panel. So let's draw the back of that. I can put a glue flap here and glue that to the inside of this, which is fine. In this particular one, what I did was I made another curved panel here, like this, that this is going to get glued behind that. So what that allows me to do is do one-sided printing. So this is all printed. Everything's printed in beautiful color and coming up. If I had done my glue flap so it goes in, I'd be looking at the back of the cardboard. So instead of doing that, I made this glue flap come up behind, so now I have all one-sided printing, so everything is printable. Otherwise, if I wanted printing on here, I have to do two-sided printing. So those are just considerations about how this is going to be made and how it's going to come from the die line. So basically, this is the die line. I probably some dust flaps here that makes this. So I'm creating the tube. The other one I did the tube in this axis. This one I'm rolling it this way. So this, when these are, I have these glued down, but when these are open, this folds flat because it's a parallelogram. All of this will fold down flat, and then when it gets set up, these get pushed into position and glued and loaded. Now I say glued, we could use wafer seals, which are like little tape seals. There's a couple of ways that could be done. There could be a little tuck flap that goes in there. But this would be much more expensive than that other kind of structure I showed in the beginning, because this would definitely lean into hand loading, and there's no automation, and there's cost with that. But it's still doable. So that's how this die line would work with this kind of a pillow pack structure. So let's do another one that's kind of interesting. So this is a whole different approach to making a box. The tube is quite different. So this is quite unique. This is a structure I did for a nasal inhaler. So all of these curves are coming from the graphics. These things could be many different shapes. So I have a little tuck flap in the front, and we're going to have two-sided printing, so we have graphics on the inside, and this opens, and the inhaler sits in these areas here. So what happens is these structures are folding flat like this. So this is coming from manufacturing to fulfillment in this direction. The manufacturer's glue seams are here now, inside. It's a whole different way of making a box. And by integrating these gussets in the corner during setup, this probably could be automated, but be very challenging. So this is going to be a hand setup. So just by lifting this up, it makes the gussets come in, and then this folds in and holds the gussets in position, and everything kind of locks without any additional gluing. And we have a tuck to hold that together. So this is very unique. So again, it would be the relationship between all of these things. So I'm just going to draw. So this is just a basic box. Nothing overly unique about this part of the geometry. And then we have this little tuck flap that I have in here, and then we're integrating these curves. Can't remember exactly what the curves look like, but it was something like this and like this. So there is my part. What's interesting about this box is the opening dynamic. So I'm just going to draw these lines in here. So this is the geometry. A little deeper there. So we're coming back over here. There's another flap on this side. That's going back here. So I'm just going to draw in my hidden line so we can keep track of how that works. And then we have this panel here with our little flap, which has a curve. There's a gusset in here, so I'm just going to draw that in. There's another gusset over here and over here. And then we have the other flap. I think that was just like a basic curve. And then we had the little detail that was going to lock in. And then what's key is these internal structures that pop up that fold into the gussets. So this only goes to here and here, like this and like this. And we have a relatively large hole here, and then if I draw my hidden lines here, we have a small hole over there. So this is quite a bit more complex, and it takes a little planning to figure this all out. But this allows us to put some graphics in here. We have some messaging. I think we put the directions inside about how you use it, because it's kind of a semi-dangerous product. If you don't use it correctly, you could hurt yourself. So it's very important. So the bottle, I think, went in here, and then the nozzle went up to the top. So this is in this open orientation. So now by taking these kinds of sketches, how do we start to figure out how this is going to work? So this one is unique. So I'm going to start with the back, which will not be my PDP. This is the back, and that's this very clean geometric shape. So let's see if I can get this to fit in here. So let's say I draw that about there. So between all these, I can start to figure this out. I have a back, I have a top. I'm going towards the front here, which is approximately the same as that top. I'm going back inside, which is also another part of that geometry, to the inside. And then I have a glue flap. This hole goes here. You got 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's the third panel. That's where it goes there. Let's see if I have enough room to do the bottom. So the bottom has a full, same size as that, and then we have a smaller rise, and then we have the smaller, and then the inside is the same depth, and that has a larger hole in it, and then a glue flap. So that's a lot to think about. So this is just coming up with the pattern to see about how this is going to work. I'm not necessarily dimensioning anything yet. What will happen is I'll measure the bottle in the 3D program and build that and start to build these panels based on the little bottle that's going to go in there. So the next part of this is drawing these sides that come around, and then we have our unique double flaps here. That's that. And then we have this one, which was just a nice, beautiful round like this. And then there's a little cut detail there. And then the key to this structure are the gussets in these corners. And those are 45s. That's how this works. Now again, I have this in front of me, and I've done this many times. I used to use this as one of the exercises in class. So all the students would cut this out so they have a feeling for how this geometry works. So I'm very familiar with this, but imagine drawing this and not having it in your hand and just thinking about what you want to do. That can be a little bit more challenging, and that's why we use samples. We look at existing things and kind of put it all together to get what we want to do. So this will be our estimation of our die line. And then this would be a plan that we would bring into the 3D program to figure out how this is going to work. Now again, I drew on this piece here, which I didn't want to do. So I want to go back to the beginning where I had this one. So it's the same exercise like we had talked about in the beginning, where I was sketching this, figuring out how this is going to work. So here is my idea of my shape. This was a result of many iterations. I didn't just draw this. I think I have like 6 variations on this, trying to figure out how to get the pleats and the gussets to go in here. So this was for crayons, and I'm containing the crayons in the center of this. I think I have a mock-up. Here we go. Here's the mock-up, or one of them that came from that. So this flap came around, and when that opens up, this would expand. So it allows easier access to get to the crayons. And you can put that down. It's sort of like a dispensing cup now instead of a box. And by doing these little gussets like this, I got rid of my dust flaps, which I think is much cleaner. So it's a very clean, open geometry, and we can tuck it back in. So the crayons are kind of haphazardly sitting in there. They're easy to get to. It holds broken ones, which is kind of nice. And you don't have to reload them into specific places. Just by, it works because I've made this now a couple of times, just by kind of pushing this all together, the crayons kind of corral themselves, and then I can tuck this down in here and it holds quite nicely. The taper comes a lot from the branding. They have this kind of tapered angled area, so it has a geometric feeling that goes along with the brand. And then when you apply the graphics to this, it works really. Here I have one with graphics. So when you apply the graphics to that, it works really well. So the geometry is supporting the brand and comes up with a user dynamic, which is very interesting when using the crayons. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. This is the kind of techniques that we will use when we start developing our ideas for the folding carton.